Welcome to Uplift and Elevate. This is a series that shares the courageous journey of individuals, getting an honest look into their life, their struggles, successes, and how they broke down barriers to get where they are today. We are Christina and Amy, and we want to give you the elevation and encouragement to write your own success story. May, you are a key figurehead in the visual effects industry, working on many blockbuster films over the past 20 years. Can you kind of enlighten us on what shaped you to be the person you are today, maybe starting with your childhood?
Very early on, I remember the first Disney film I watched, my parents took me to we talked about it recently because it's Disney 100, right? And it was Lady and the Tramp. So I've always kind of loved animation, but my parents, they watch movies, like lots of movies. So we would watch movies like at least once a week, at the cinema. And a lot of times it's like, double features, sometimes triple features. So I spent like, the whole day like in the movie theater. And I was exposed to all genres that I probably shouldn't be exposed to at like 8 years old, like Jaws, for instance, right? Or Amityville Horror. But I was still exposed to them all, right? So, I watched like a wide range of films, period.
I guess it was just watching films and then understood from there about visual effects, and then it kind of just went on from there.
When I was growing up, they had like a TV series, like, or a TV episode every single week, and it was called Movie Magic. And you would watch all the behind the scenes, and it would be like a half an hour episode. I mean, that because I love film, it's always great to see, like, oh my God, I can't believe that that's how they shot it. So it's always interesting to see the behind the scenes. I would say, like, I'm kind of always art oriented, so I took like fine arts in university. And then eventually I took a 3D course, and I started off at a very small company in Toronto, where I worked for free for like a good 3 months just to get the hang of production. And then from then on, like, I got another position where they said, well, if you can produce something we can use, in our like film, then we'll give you a job, right? And that's how it all kind of started.
What are some of the biggest challenges you believe you faced earlier on in your career?
Oh, there's many, many steps. So when I finished my 3D course, it's really hard to get a job when, there are very little positions in the city that you live in, right? Because, it was such a new thing. So I went to SIGGRAPH in LA. And of course, like you're being young and naive, you go there and you think, oh yeah, someone's gonna like digital domain's gonna give me a job. And I think it was quite difficult, like, because you are like just out of school and you're young and you go and approach, like a place like Digital Domain and Sony, and they're like, oh no, you have no experience. Go back to your small city and gain a little bit of experience in the small studios, and then you can come back to us in 5 years, right? So you would get like a little bit disheartened, and that's quite tough, because to be full of these ideas and aspirations, and then get a little bit crushed. So I think that was difficult, and I think like one thing that I think that I also learned in the industry, like I did start off in the smaller studios, was I started working for an editor before I went into 3D. So and that was because it was the only position I can get at the time, and 3D was really what I wanted to do. But I was working for an editor as his PA, and I remember like that was kind of one of my first experiences of sexual harassment without really knowing about it. And I think that's another challenge that you kind of like, how do you deal with it, right? So I had a client, I was like leaving for the end of the day, and he says, hey, and I said, oh, good night, I'm leaving, do you need anything? And he goes, oh, well, why don't you come and sit on my lap and I can tell you? And I'm like, oh, well, actually, no, I'm not.
Oh,
I'm like,
thanks.
I really do have to leave for the end of the day, but thank you for the offer. And then I left, right? But
Yeah.
it's kind of like like, what do you do?
Yeah.
I think that's like, and that was my first experience, and I have experienced many, but and I think it's like being aware that like when you think it's wrong, and just being able to know you can just walk away, right? I think that's really important nowadays. I think that as long as if you feel, like I said, I tell my kids all the time, if you feel it's wrong, then it's wrong, then you say
Hmm.
no, right? And I think that's your gut feeling. Your gut's going to tell you that if that's okay or not okay. And if you don't feel comfortable, you just don't feel comfortable, and you just say, hey, maybe you think it's funny, but please, can you not say that again? And I think
Yeah.
that's important. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's
Okay.
really good advice. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. So
Yeah.
always listen to your gut because that's how you feel. Don't dismiss your feelings.
I'm going to go back to the editor. I mean, I think he literally was my first job, right? And he was nice up to a certain point, and I was working like for free on the weekends, and I was working late in the evenings for free. And he asked me once, hey, can you come in this weekend? I said, oh, no problem, but it's Mother's Day. Can you tell me what time you want me to come in? And then he just had this rant out of me, like at me, and he like used the F word, the whole time. And I'm like, going, excuse me, I'm coming for free. All I asked was, what time would you like me to come in? And he just went off. And I just said, you know what, like, you're not a very nice boss. So I said, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to quit now, and I'll come back 2 weeks for my pay. And he looked at me and he goes, what? Right? And he still kept on going, and I walked out the door. And then he calls me later and he apologized. And I said, I'm sorry. I'm like, I can't, after all that, I'm still not going to come back to work for you because what you said is inappropriate. Right? And I mean, that could have been the end of my career, who knows, right? But I'd rather not be in a career like that, in a situation like that, than to have to endure that kind of abuse in order to move forward in my career, if that makes sense. And I think that's also very like difficult to register sometimes. It's like, like, oh, what's going to happen if if I'm rude, or if I am disagreeable back, right? Or if I say no, or if I quit, right? Like, does that mean I'm not going to have a job and I'm not going to be working in this industry? And it's very difficult, I mean, for everybody to kind of think like, is that okay? Well, it's not, right? And I think like if it's not going to make you happy, then you shouldn't be working, in that environment. It's too toxic. And I think like even nowadays, sometimes it's still very toxic environments. And, and if it's toxic, then it's not really good for your mental health. And I think you should get out.
You did the right
Yeah.
thing, and I think people listening could benefit from that too because some of them take it and move on
Yeah.
and still carry on in that similar environment, and that person who's being abusive never learns a lesson. So I think that person, when they do that, they should be confronted, or at least if you don't feel comfortable letting them know, then let HR know and then
Yeah.
leave, because I know it's hard to predict what's going to happen to you in the future, but in the present you gotta go, or you gotta do something about it. Did the right thing. So thank you for sharing your story. Appreciate getting that out in the open. You're a VFX supervisor. Are you able to kind of shed light on what a visual effects supervisor does, and like what is your day-to-day like?
A visual effects supervisor, I mean, they are kind of almost second in command of the whole, like, show, whether you're on vendor side or on production side. And I think, like, if you're looking at visual effects supervisors on the vendor side, I mean, you really do start from, a lot of times you start right from the beginning, and that is like, assisting the visual effects producer or bidding producer in VFX breakdowns, and that's assisting them in how many man days are expected per shot, based on discipline as well. Following it is to allow you to, one, have a cost for the client, but then two, like allow for resources for the project. Okay, so that's kind of more like the initial part. So it's you like sitting down and looking at the script and looking at the overall breakdown, seeing what the client's expectations are, and how you're going to have methodologies and pipelines that is ensuring that you can take it from inception all the way to completion. Okay. And then again, on the vendor side, you are the client facing right? So you're presenting to the client the work that is done in-house in the vendor side.
It's a big role. Are you ever on set?
Been on production side and on vendor side. So on production side is slightly different, but it's it is managing different types of people. Okay, so you will also start very very early on a show sometimes before it's greenlit. Sometimes it's just been greenlit and you're on soft prep. And what that would mean is that you've got the script first and you start early discussions with the director and with the producers, right? And sometimes the studio on methodology, right? You will also be advising on the budget, right? So, let's say you've got like, I don't know, 3 million for visual effects, right? And after reading the script, it's like, 6. Okay. Then, you have to start breaking it down. It says, okay, well, no, we have to get down to 3. Like, how can we get down to 3, right? So, that's where you would start to advise on, which shots should be like moved to trying to get speak to other HODs on like what's the best methodology, right? Maybe SFX can do something, the visual effects, instead of going into visual effects. Maybe it's hair and makeup, maybe it's costumes, maybe it's just, the art department, right? Managing the budget with the visual effects producer, right? To ensure that, the shots that's supposed to be visual effects has the correct element shots, and then the ones that should be in camera should be at least try to be avoided so that you're not impacting the overall budget. And I think also on the production side, like, you are then managing the vendors. Now, you're not, you aren't actually like sitting with the artist, but you are sitting with the vendors, and you then have to kind of, okay, here's the budget, here's the breakdown, and then you need to provide the brief for that. Okay. And that's really important is that, again, what you do as a supervisor, right, and how you execute, the brief is going to impact the vendors, right? So, so you have to be aligned with the director, right? With the showrunner, okay, with the DPs, right? All the creatives that's on the production side, so that you can then bring that to the vendor, so that and then have them be able to execute the creative idea that has been previously discussed and shot.
Nice.
Different. It's different, but it's a lot of collaboration. I can tell you. I think either end is a lot of collaboration. I think it's like, I think I once told, I was explaining like what the vendor visual effects supervisor, like how hard that position is. And actually, I think it's harder than any other position because you have to be collaborative with everybody. You have to make sure that your client is happy. You have to make sure the studio is happy. You have to make sure that your VPs and your upper management is happy. Then everybody that is on your team, right, on your level, all the other supervisors and the HODs on your side, and then all the artists, right? So you're like literally kind of in the middle of this, like, you're like the hole in the donut. And you have to make sure everybody around you is like, happy. Right. And, and it's quite a bit to manage. Whereas I think if you're on the production side, like you don't have to deal with the artists on the vendor side, right? You just kind of like, you're kind of the bottom of the food chain. I'm going to call it the bottom of the food chain because you've got everybody else above you, the directors, the producers, and, the showrunners and like the studio, and you're at the bottom. Okay. You have to make sure that now all the vendors are delivering to you, right? And I think it's either way. I think it's quite a tough role.
I imagine so, because you need to rely on those vendors and what they're saying to you, that they're going to be able to deliver on time, but also the quality is there and the brief is hit as well. So there is a lot of stress on the client side as well.
Yes, exactly.
So you've worked on a significant amount of film and TV projects over the years, including big Hollywood blockbusters. You are well established in the industry. You make up 2.9% of VFX supervisors in the industry, according to the latest statistics released. Can you share with us your experience?
I started off in FX, and I mean, I love I love my job, right? I love working in the film industry, and I love visual effects, and I think that in itself, because I'm surrounded by creative people all the time, is very inspiring. Sometimes it's like the team is what makes it really fun. And even if the projects kind of be like, oh, that's a little bit boring, right? But I think that's like what I love about this industry. And the other thing is, because I've traveled so much, right? I love traveling, so I love working in Toronto. I loved working in Montreal and Vancouver. I love going to the States, try working in California and then working in Sydney. And then the fact that you meet all those people again sometimes, it's like, yes, I may have met them in California, but then I resaw them in Sydney. And then when I came to London, they all kind of all showed up in London. So it's like you're building this huge network of like friends in the industry that also enjoys working in the industry. So, there's those are the things like I just love about visual effects. It's a huge community of creative people.
I know it's can be very stressful to work in the visual effects industry just because of deadlines and budgets to hit
Yeah.
and directors to manage and everybody else, all the creatives. Is there anything in particular you do to de-stress from it all?
I run in the mornings, like I try to exercise in the mornings before I work. I and At the end of the day, especially if I've got a good team, I like to go out and have a drink with them. But I think I particularly I like stress, which is very odd. Like I find it very challenging. I think like the more challenging a project, sometimes the happier I am. It's an odd one.
Yeah, usually it means growth, right? Stress in a
Yeah.
particular kind of category, though, but usually when it's a good kind of stress, it just means that you're learning and you're growing and you're learning something new, whether it's about the pipeline or a different methodology.
And I think not to confuse it to a toxic environment, because a stressful environment doesn't necessarily mean it's a toxic environment. It's just that you've got a challenge and you have to face it and you have to deal with it and then coming up with solutions. To me that's a fun part of it, is to be able to like face that challenge and progress from it and find solutions.
And speaking about toxic environments, so one of the things we spoke about in our initial chat is inherent bias. How people are not recognizing some of the things that they are saying is actually geared towards a specific gender. How do you usually approach it with them when that sort of thing happens?
One of the projects I worked on, one of the supervisors said, "Oh, hey May, I'm a dude. I love explosions," and I'm like going, "Okay, I'm not a dude." And I also love explosions, right? And it's, I mean, that time I kind of said something, but a lot of times I don't, because I missed that opportunity. Being educated to understand, like, when you are faced with it, then you might be then more equipped to respond. And obviously you try to respond in a polite way, right? But yeah, I think it happens. And like I said, it's sometimes it's hard to detect, and you realize it afterwards. Oh, that was not nice, right? Like, what do you mean? Like, oh, you must like you must like Barbie because you're female, oh, you must like love like pink, or it's just it's those kind of things, right? It goes, oh well, oh, you won't understand, like it's not happened to you, and you're like going, what do you mean? How do you know it hasn't happened to me, right? It's one of those things, is that if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if you're honest to yourself, you can then be more equipped to deal with it, right? And sometimes it might mean that you need a support network, and sometimes it's just education. I think sometimes people say things because they really just don't realize it's not okay anymore, right? Because the stuff that they used to say, was acceptable. It's one of the ones that I kind of told people don't like, it's probably not appropriate anymore, is like, don't say Chinese whispers, for instance, right? And I said, well, actually, no, you can just say, oh, there's a communication breakdown. And I think it's just educating those people. And some people might say, well, oh, I don't understand why you think it's like offensive. And I said, well, I don't, it's not that I think it's offensive. I just don't think it's appropriate to say. it doesn't offend me, but it might offend someone else, right? Or it does offend me, and I'm trying to be nice and saying, well, just it's just not appropriate, right? It's just not PC. Let's just use other terms. There's other terms, right, that we can use now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're moving on from that, and I know some people will say, "Oh, but we've always said that. So what's the difference now?"
Yeah.
So it's just like, no, step back, realize what you're saying, and go with less controversial. Erase that from your mind.
And
Use a different
I
phrase.
exactly, and I learned lots from like my daughter as well. I mean, she's 21, and she even tells me, she goes, "Mom, we don't say those things anymore." Right? And I'll
Yeah.
be like, oh, like I don't even realize it, right? And she goes, no, there's new terms for these. And the next generation has like they have a different language, right? And I think it's just, kind of understanding what that language is, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And it's just being educated, right? And being just aware of what is coming out of your mouth sometimes, right? It's like, oh, think about it before you speak, like everybody says that, right? Like, I know my mom told me, goes, oh, if it's not nice, don't say it.
A phrase that I'm learning more often and trying to get in front of it in the moment when people do speak out of turn to me. What makes you say that? So giving them a moment to think about it, step back and think about it.
Yeah.
What did I just say? And it's giving them a chance to kind of come back from that moment that they just had and kind
Yeah.
of go, oh, actually, no, this is what I really meant. So I'm using that phrase more often these days and trying to get them to think about what they say, so that way they're not doing it to anyone else.
That's a good one. I'm going to use that one.
And then also another phrase is, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Especially if someone's saying something random that you're like, oh, I'm surprised that came out of their mouth, is, are you okay?
Yeah.
Especially when they become quite aggressive towards you. It's like, oh, are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Step them, pull them aside. Hopefully they'll snap out of that behavior.
And I think that's what it's just, it's trying to diminish the aggression, isn't it? Right. So I think when you ask them, oh, are you okay? Like, did something happen to make you say something like that? You're trying to reduce the aggression that's coming in your direction.
What are the things that get you out of bed in the morning?
I just like to wake up early. I like to use as much of my day as possible. And I sleep very late because I want to sleep very little because I want to do tons all day long.
What are the things about the job you wish you knew sooner?
Visual effects supervision. Because I honestly it was a very long path for me, right? Because I started off as a generalist and then an FX artist and then FX lead and FX supervisor, CG super. I mean, I've done all the roles, and I think that it's not something that was obvious to me. I didn't go in going, hey, I want to be visual effects supervisor. I just wanted to work in film. Right? And I think if I had known that this was within my reach sooner, I think I would have reached out sooner to do the position. Okay. And I think it's one of those things that I just never thought about. And I think it's only because of my 3D manager, right? And also the VFX supervisors that I've worked with. This is why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, I don't know, no one ever told me that I could do it, And I think it's really important that yes, actually you can do it. Right? Females can be visual effects supervisors. So here I am.
Where are you headed next? What's your next goal?
Well, I am working in development phase of this film with this writer and producer at the moment. It's not greenlit, so that's really exciting because this is the first time I'm on it well beyond the stage, and I'm really excited. So and she is absolutely lovely as well, the writer producer, and so I'm hoping that this will be the next step.
Sounds really great, especially when you can get on as early as possible. Those relationships that you build at the start is so important, especially when you're not under pressure as well. So it's a little bit more easygoing. So yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun.
What's great is she wants a really good work-life balance. and she's got kids. I have kids. I mean, my kids are older, but I think it's like even if I don't have kids, I think even people who don't have kids, they have a life. They have things that they want to do that's not just work. So, she's trying to create this very collaborative like environment, and she's just super inspirational. So I'm very excited. We'll see where it goes.
Where can we find you at the weekends, May?
Well, right now, at as much screenings as I can actually attend. Otherwise, I'm usually home with with the kids.
Did you take your kids to Disney films when they were growing up?
Oh my gosh, yes. We have every Disney film alive on DVD. But also like, we go to all of them. We watch a lot of manga, a lot of anime, and I've been taking my older daughter to see a lot of films that she would not watch, like have watched because from streaming, because like kids these days they just pick and choose, right? And then with like the whole streaming, they tell you, oh, we recommend you this because you saw that, right? But I think like, I took her to The Deepest Breath, amazing documentary, right? Films like what did I took her to Foe, I took her to like Fair Play, and like films that she would never have watched, right? Including like Past Lives. Some films is not in the English language. Like I took her to The Zone of Interest. That's not in the English language. And so that, I said like she's at least she's happy to go. And then she said, oh, I would never have watched this without like unless you took me. And I think it's important, right? Because, it's not just the stuff that they recommend you. There's lots of other stuff that you might be interested in, and you should explore them.
Who would you like to see on the next podcast?
Davina Darby, she's amazing, she's, a writer, a producer, and she's hoping to co-direct the film that she wrote. And I think like, she's a good source of inspiration.
Thank you, May, for sharing your story with us today. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.